Hi, I'm Ann Rieselbach, the League's Program and Membership Director. Welcome to this online Distance Edition studio visit hosted in Portland by Lever Architects. We'll hear from the team, including founding principal Thomas Robinson and principal Chandra Robinson. This online insider's view reinvents the League's in-person studio visits, receptions, tours, and project reviews, formerly called First Fridays and recently renamed After Hours. We began virtual visits to studios and building sites out of necessity during the pandemic and found that now that the New York-based events have returned to in-person gatherings, we missed the opportunity to range further afield across North America to visit practices like Lever, who are exploring innovative approaches to sustainability, materials research, construction, and building design. Whether online or in person, these programs provide the opportunity to both see recent and current projects, as well as to get a sense of the studio culture, to learn about where and how firms are working. Today's program will be introduced and moderated by David Benjamin. David, the founding principal of design studio The Living, is Director of Architecture Research at Autodesk and an associate professor at Columbia University's GSAPP. His work combines research and practice with a focus on, in his words, an expanded and actionable framework of environmental sustainability. Following the presentation and David's conversation with the firm's principals, the discussion will be open to all attendees. You can pose your questions in the Q&A section, not the chat section, the Q&A section. And before we begin, a quick thank to the League's sponsors. This program is supported in part by the New York State Council on the Arts with the support of the Office of the Governor and the New York State Legislature, as well as by the League's members, whose annual support makes all of our programs and events possible. Please visit archleague.org for further information about membership, the League's upcoming events, and such as this season's recently announced After Hours lineup, calls for entries and proposals for the League Prize and Norden Fellowship, and our online publication Urban Omnibus, as well as videos of past programs. And finally, towards the end of this program, information will be posted in the chat section for the League's members seeking CEUs for attending the program. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Anne, and I'm very happy to be here and very excited to introduce our three presenters from Lever Architecture, an architecture firm that's known for design excellence and innovative work with mass timber. So as you probably already know, if you're here, the 35-person firm is based in Portland, Oregon and Los Angeles. And it works with local communities, institutions, and creative companies to create buildings that both elevate human experience and foreground climate justice. Their work includes projects of many different scales and types, and I think we'll see some examples of those today. And it also involves groundbreaking research on next-generation material assemblies and tools for sustainability, which I think we'll also hear about today. Lever has received more than 50 design awards, including the Architectural League's own legendary Emerging Voices Award. And they've been also awarded more than $3 million in research grants, including a recent United States Forest Service Wood Innovations Grant that will fund the firm's digital tool for tracking wood products and forest management practices that are associated with those wood products. For these reasons and many more, the firm was recently named by Fast Company as one of the world's most innovative companies. Thomas Robinson is the founder of Lever Architecture. His projects involve first-of-their-kind timber buildings for clients such as the Nature Conservancy and Adidas. Thomas has lectured on mass timber throughout the United States, Europe, and South America, and he has served as the USDA Wood Innovation Grant visiting professor at the University of Arkansas. Thomas believes in the potential for architecture to be an intelligent tool that impacts the environment beyond just a specific building site and becomes a regenerative force in the world. He believes that material decisions that architects make each day matter. He believes that where materials come from, how they're produced, and who puts them together is directly connected to some of the major challenges of our time, including housing, economic equity, and climate change. Chandra Robinson is principal at Lever Architecture. She recently completed a LEED Platinum campus for the Equity-Based Foundation Meyer Memorial Trust, and she's currently working on several civic and educational projects, including the Portland Museum's School of Art in Portland, Maine, the Portland Museum of Art in Portland, Maine, Portland State University's new School of Art and Design, and 2 libraries for Multnomah County. Chandra is passionate about creating beautiful spaces that are accessible for everyone, and she enjoys working closely with clients to create designs that are expressive of their values. In addition to her civic design work, Chandra is vice chair of the Portland Design Commission, a founding board member and treasurer of the National Organization for Minority Architects Portland chapter, and advisory board member of Hip Hop Architecture Camp. Jonathan Hepner is also a principal at Lever Architecture. He has 25 years of design and management experience with civic and creative organizations. Born and raised in Oregon, his interest in timber detailing and construction led to his management role on Framework, the first mass timber high-rise project to be permitted in the United States. Jonathan currently directs Lever's timber research, including the 40+ mass timber tests completed for the Framework project. He has worked closely with the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and university research engineers to perform wood building life cycle assessment studies, to conduct research for the NSF-funded NARI Tallwood project, and to develop Oregon as a global innovation hub for the advancement of mass timber building systems. On a personal note, I've known Thomas for several years, and I'm continually impressed by the firm's growth, as well as his own creativity and thoughtfulness. Thomas is an excellent critic in architecture school studio reviews. Thank you, Thomas, for all your time there. He's also an insightful thinker in an interview, and he and the whole Lever team are brilliant designers. So please join me in welcoming Lever Architecture, starting with Thomas Robinson.
Sound. All right. Thank you, David. And thank you, Anne and Zoe and the Architectural League for inviting us to be here today. I assume you can hear me. If you thumbs up, that's good.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me and you can see me, I hope. So I think we're good, huh?
No, I'm trying to just 1 second.
Oh. I had 1 second.
Okay.
Fine, we're good, I think. It wouldn't be Zoom if there wasn't a little technical glitch to start out. So thanks very much for everyone for being here today. And I want to welcome you to Lever's office building in Portland, Oregon, where I'm actually sitting. And we call the building Albina Yard, which is named after a major rail yard that's about a mile away from here. And this is the front elevation on Albina Avenue in the Albina neighborhood. And we're super excited to have you virtually visit, meet our team, and hear about a few projects. And, I also want to give you a quick introduction to sort of the history of the firm and how our design approach has evolved over time, really through the lens of this building. And then really expanding out to talk about a number of projects, and many of which are within a few miles of where I'm sitting, and all of which have been completed since 2016. So this is our office. This is where we sit. This is an early picture, so it's very clean. You'll see some video to show you that it's not this clean anymore. But I think what was important about it is at the time that we did this, it was the first building in the United States to be built with domestically sourced cross-laminated timber. And we had to develop details that no one had ever sort of touched before. And this is one of them you see on the right, which was a detail connector that's very elegant, but also works seismically. And we were really interested also in how we could express the material qualities of CLT. So that's cross-laminated timber. You've probably heard about it. And that's the panel you see hanging in the air. And because it was really the first time we'd use these materials. So we're like, what can this material do differently that's, maybe specific and could have an architectural expression? So one of the things we found is that this 4¼ inch panel can actually cantilever 4 feet. So that really became the expression of the building. And you can see on the right, the first panel being lifted off the truck in this urban condition. And you can sort of see how that sense of an undulating presence where you go from 4 feet to 1 feet. And that really is, in a way, the one move that sort of defines the character of Albina Yard. So something that's expressive of this material, but also has a presence urbanistically, this idea of thinness, but also strength. Our site is quite unusual in that it's actually a flag lot. So we were working with the developer, who's a friend of mine, and actually the contractor for the project. We were able to create this courtyard. So there's an existing building on the corner, and the building kind of turns around it. So we were also, in addition to doing this first of its kind mass timber building, we did the first sort of installation of recycled containers in Portland that met the urban code. So those containers actually contain offices upstairs, but also a shared conference room for the entire building. And, as you see here, we're walking into that courtyard in the flag lot. And this is really a great space for social events, just getting outside. We have a lot of, our shop is actually located where you see that neon sign. Originally, there was a bar there, which unfortunately is no longer. But now that's actually where our shop is. And that connects directly to the vertical stair. You'll see the person coming down in the red shirt. There's a circulating stair, which looks like this. That's our main stair. It's also a fire stair that I'll be taking you up later in a little video. But before I really jump in, I wanted to get a quick overview of what we plan to cover and who will be talking to you today. So Chandra will talk about a few really important mission-driven projects that are focused on the Albina neighborhood that we call home. Michael Gastineau will show a new mass timber art school for Portland State University that just started construction. And we're also going to visit Timber Lab, which is a mass timber integrator's facility in Portland, where they're actually fabricating all the beams for this project at this very moment. And Jonathan will give you some very specific examples of how Lever's approach to innovation in a way manifests itself in the work. And then, unfortunately, Haley Coughlin, who's based in LA, had to evacuate this morning because of smoke. So I'm going to actually be doing her part, on presenting 2 larger scale recent projects that we just finished in Los Angeles. And I just want to wish everyone there safety because I have family there as well. And then I will conclude with with the Portland, Maine Museum of Art, Portland Museum of Art in Portland, Maine. I'm often asked why the name Lever. The name was really inspired by the Greek philosopher, mathematician, and engineer Archimedes. He lived over 2,000 years ago and described the 3 types of levers, and those first, second, and third class levers. And if you're interested, you can research them. But they're really the foundation of modern mechanics. It's really the tools that we use to build with. And one of the quotes that struck me as I was sort of reading about him is this: "Give me a place to stand and a lever large enough and I can move the world." And we've done a really amazing job of moving the world in one direction with all the physics and the engineering that these levers provide. And I think what we are thinking is we need to sort of push back against that and think of architecture maybe as a transformational tool that can be a regenerative force in the world. So it's not for us just about being sustainable, but really considering how our work can move maybe from its more extractive roots to a place where our actions can really start to repair, the landscapes, communities, and ecologies that, while not on the site that we're building on, are still very much connected to it. And the Pacific Northwest, I think is important as a place. This is actually a view of Mount Hood. And if I look to my left here, I can actually see the mountain today. And it's always a good day in the Pacific Northwest when you can see the mountains. But I think it's also important to note that the power and scale of these mountains reminds us of our precariousness and our position in the natural world. You know, we had Mount St. Helens erupt not that long ago. These mountains are all active volcanoes on the Ring of Fire. You know, we're due for a major earthquake. There's definitely a knowledge and connection to nature. And I think also, you know, I moved to Portland in 2003, and what I sort of kind of noticed was this, you know, incredible landscape relative to timber. So this is a map of the forests of the United States showing sort of above ground woody biomass, which is a great kind of phrase. But you can sort of see the darkest green is right next to where Portland is located. And I think that we're also the place in the world where Douglas fir, which is the, you know, strongest structural hardwood, grows most you know, effectively in its native habitat. But I also think this map points to the fact that there's incredible potential in the Northeast. You could see the forests of Maine. Maine has more forests than Portland, and we're starting to like really look to think of how we can take these incredible resources. I think United States is really a forested country, and think about how to leverage them in the Northeast. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with Portland, I just wanted to zoom out and sort of place us in the context of the city. Portland is a port city. We're kind of unusual that we're an export port. We're like the largest export port of grains and raw materials in the US. And it's at the confluence of two major rivers. So where you see Lever, that's the Willamette River that comes right through the downtown of Portland, and then it matches up with the mighty Columbia, which is one of the largest rivers in North America that empties into the Pacific. And our location at Lever, we're located where the Willamette takes a bend to the west, and there's an area called North Portland that we'll talk more about. And I happen to live like on the forest on the other side of the river, and I'm always sort of crossing this river. It's always present in our character. And I think when you think about forests, that forest that I showed you on the previous map is the largest urban forest that we are aware of in the United States, 5,000 acres that you can actually be present in the city. But I think it's important to note that forests cover half the state of Oregon, and they're really define the culture and economy and politics of the state. But it's also connected to a deeper past where the Native Americans actually managed these forests with fire. And we're really, in a way, revisiting and learning from Native American practices how to manage this incredible resource more sustainably. I think also at this moment, you know, forests are one of the best tools we'd have to address climate change at scale. They absorb carbon. The new growth of forests emit oxygen, and that embodied carbon can be stored in mass timber buildings for the life of the structure. In the space you'll see here, this is a library about a mile and a half from our office. And there's other carbon capture technologies out there, but at this moment, this is the tool we have, and we need to use it. And the opportunity and the choice to build with this incredible timber from this region and also other parts of the country that we're working to develop is what we've really leveraged in our work. And we, in 2015, we came up with a name for this process called forest to frame. It's an obvious play on farm to table, and we don't mean that in an elitist way. Forest to frame is really digging into the supply chain. So this is just a map of forest to the frame. And I'm actually sitting in the top of that building you see there on the right, and really mapping that supply chain and thinking that that's a place that you can actually be creative. And we're really inspired in many ways by, you know, incredible chefs that are out there cultivating their own ingredients to think about how they can create new experiences. And we feel that kind of ethic can be really inspirational for architecture. So 10 years ago, it's hard to believe, 10 years ago, we started to hear about a new material originating out of Northern Europe called cross-laminated timber, or CLT for short. And it's a prefabricated panel you see hanging in the air. And this is a picture I took of this building. And we also were hearing about efforts to fabricate this material in the United States. And a small group of people here got together, got a grant of $250,000, that they actually used, a manufacturer took that on, a glue laminated timber manufacturer took it on and built this press located 3 hours south of Portland that could make a panel 10 by 25 feet long. And that was like a watershed moment in the United States that we could actually use this amazing resource locally. So before I take you up into our office, I want to just share my favorite image of this project. It's not of the building itself, because I think it hints at a new way of thinking about buildings that is relevant both here and anywhere where there's sort of that connection to that forest landscape. The timber panel you see hanging in the air was grown and harvested from the Doug fir forest you see in the distance in Mount Hood, and it was fabricated in rural Oregon in the press I showed you previously, shipped 3 hours to Portland, and they put together 4,000 square feet of flooring in about 2 hours. So from a handful of projects in 2016, including this one, there are now over 2,000 mass timber projects under construction or built in the US. And that's a pretty staggering amount, and it's continuing to accelerate. So these are some of the projects, timber or otherwise, they all sort of have a connection to that ethic of construction that are complete. And these are projects that are on the board, about to be complete, or in construction. And we also, so I think that will take you sort of through zooming in here to our office. So you sort of went from that bigger, now we're zooming right into our office where I'm standing or sitting right now. And this is a video, sort of a drone video of our office. And on the left, you see here, there's an amazing coffee shop called Albina Press. And I go there every morning to get a cappuccino. I did that actually this morning. And they're incredible craftspeople. They've actually been here longer than we have, making cappuccinos for 10 years. And I think that idea of craft and experience related to experience is something that's really important. And this video actually has an intercut with images of the construction that happened in 2016. So you'll see these panels being installed for the first time in an urban environment. And then you can also see that it was really done by hand. At this time, we didn't have the CNC fabrication that many people have today. So this is really a very specific time where we're really trying to think about how we can do this type of work. I'm actually walking through the courtyard. I'll be going up the stair and ending up in the conference room here. We were really fortunate to have in Portland one CNC machine run by a Swiss-trained timber engineer. And this was Stefan Schneider. And he helped us work to sort of machine these elements that had never been done before. And one of the great stories is that we were talking to the manufacturer. They said, you know, are you going to do, who's doing the shop drawings? And we were like, I guess we are. So basically we took that on, worked with Stefan, did the shop drawings for this building, because we realized this was for the kind of climate and the culture here, glue lamps were a commodity. They'd never worked with an architect before. So we really sort of had that opportunity to connect with them. This is our model shop on the ground floor that I mentioned earlier in that view. We have a great laser cutter. We have the ability to do it. It's also a kind of kitchen space. And this is just me walking up the stair. I do this pretty much every morning. And coming into the side of the office, which is on that side of the flag lot. And this is a view of what the office kind of looks like today. It's a little messier than you saw in those earlier photos. We have a kind of kitchen space in the back, but I wanted to just point out there's these amazing details that really define it. And there's also this great smell. When people come into our office, it smells like timber. I don't think we smell it anymore, but other people too. And there's always pieces of material around that have been here. And this is one of the key things we have as a library in the center. So it's there's always that resource there. And then this is actually what I'm looking at right now. If I turn my head and look this way, Mount Hood, it always looks way smaller in the photographs. I don't know why, but it's actually really present in the city and something that's really part of, the culture of the office, really that visual connection that we can actually see where the forest is and relative to our building. So I'm going to hand it off to Chandra.
All right. This is when we get to do our musical chairs, which is actually kind of fun, very choreographed. Welcome. I'm really so excited that you're all here visiting us in our office. And I'm Chandra. I'm a principal here and I grew up here in Portland, and I'm really passionate about work that serves the community and work that expresses culture. So I'm going to talk to you about our office culture and about projects that are here in our neighborhood. So if you were here in our office with us, this is kind of what you would see, people hanging out together. There's a really good mix of different folks here, people with young kids, people who are recent grads, and we really like to hang out together. We actually eat lunch together, not at our desks, but in the kitchen at our table. We volunteer together. We sort of have weekend events and even pack meals for kids on the weekends, which is a really fun sort of volunteer thing that we do together. We also really like hanging out together in other ways. So there's a group of people who are really like to play volleyball, and they play over at a park that's nearby that's actually a sand court. And then every year we actually participate in a bike commute challenge where we compete against other architecture firms who can ride the most rides on their bikes. And we actually win a lot of the time, but it's really I'm not really into biking. So it's really the one day a year that I actually ride a bike just so we can get our 100% participation. But it's a fun event for everybody. Then there's a few things that we do every year that are multiple times a year that are kind of office traditions. And one of those is the birthday cape and hat. So everyone, including Thomas, all of us will wear this silly hat and cape and take a photo. And then it kind of goes around the office in our office chat. And I don't know, it's very fun. And like everyone else, we have lots of regular happy hours, but we also like to do a themed cocktail happy hour sometimes. And so, up in the corner there, you'll see our little baby Yoda margaritas. And that was from a May the 4th be with you happy hour. That was really fun. We also all really love our pets, and we have them up on the fridge. And one of my very favorite days of the year is the day we do a fundraiser where the Oregon Humane Society comes in and they bring us like a dozen puppies and kittens, and we get to play with them for an hour in the office. And it's the best day of the year. I love it. Mostly though, we really just like to celebrate together, big wins and little wins, and kind of come together as often as we can so that we are there kind of supporting one another and we feel like a really close-knit group. So like other architecture offices, obviously we have pinups, right? We have things pinned up on the wall all the time, like you saw in the video that Thomas was showing. And we use these to kind of collaborate together to talk about the work that's happening or the work that has happened and kind of what we want to do next. And it makes us be able to collaborate and work as a team really well. And we also do a lot of project visits. And what's really cool is, we're really fortunate to do a lot of work in our own neighborhood. And that means that everyone who works in the office has the opportunity to visit all of these projects in person under construction and really be able to see all the time that was spent in the crafting of these details and really see them come to life and kind of feel what the building is supposed to feel like, which is not something you get to do as much if all of your projects are far away. So I think we're really fortunate to kind of work in our neighborhood. So again, here's our office, and I'm going to share a few projects that are in here in our neighborhood. And our neighborhood is called Albina. And Albina is the historically Black neighborhood in Portland. And like in every other city in America, the freeway was run through the Black neighborhood, and a lot of land was taken through eminent domain for, reasons of they said there was blight, or they said a hospital needed to expand. So they were taking the land, a lot of businesses and homes were raised. And so right now, you can see all of these projects that are in this neighborhood that we're doing, right? So there's, looks like there's at least 10 that are really close to the office, and we have more that are farther away, but these are all projects that are directly impacting people in our community. And so we're really proud to get to do that, to get to help revitalize the community. So we're going to first go to one of our projects called Meyer Memorial Trust. It's really close to the office. And this is an office project. So this is the headquarters for a foundation that just works here in Oregon to provide grants to organizations that are supporting community in different ways around equity, around sustainability, around innovation. And the real idea behind this project is that it's very much about equity, and it's very much about sustainability and sustainable wood sourcing. So you can see here on the map that all of these different materials that we used on the project were all sourced within about 70 miles of the project. And the reason that we do that is so that there's an economic impact on all of our local rural communities, so that we are employing folks who are already in our neighborhood, but also so that we can understand the sourcing of all of these materials and who are the people who are actually producing them, milling them, turning them into products that we're using. So we understand who we're impacting, right? We want to make sure that we're kind of spreading the wealth around and making sure that minority and women-owned businesses are involved, and all of the money isn't going just to kind of the biggest folks who are kind of monopolizing, right? So all of these projects or all of these materials are coming from really close by, including mass plywood, which is an innovative project or material that is only made here in Oregon. And so using this material is a way to support Oregon, but it's also a way to use something that is really humble. It's a humble, simple material, but you can make it really beautiful. And so have this kind of space that kind of glows with this wood and is not fancy, but is so beautiful and kind of makes people feel really at home in this space. Some of the other local sustainable wood materials we chose were a locally produced linear wood ceiling product and locally produced wood flooring products that come from a family-run forest here in Oregon. So there's a lot of sort of other things that we did in terms of equity and thinking about how we designed this project. And I think the biggest one and one of the most interesting is that the project is designed so that it is partly mass timber and partly traditional stick frame. And what that does is it allows us to involve a more diverse group of subcontractors to build the project, because they didn't have to have mass timber experience in order to work on this. But being on this project and doing what they're comfortable with, the traditional stick framing, they get to kind of see how it comes together and get to sort of get a foot in the door, so that they can get on more projects and be more successful at bidding them, right? The other things we do in terms of equity in this project are really that, all these spaces are designed with ADA in mind, but going beyond ADA, so that all of the spaces kind of are comfortable for people of different mobility levels, different body types, and different experiences. There's a lot of really beautiful art in the building that was commissioned by Native American artists. And there's a, fully native plantings garden on the outside as well. So this project did a lot of different things, and it's got some really impressive stats. 80% of the scope of work was done by women and BIPOC-owned subcontractors. And really it started from the top. So, the client was really invested and they wanted to hire a developer and hire Lever as the architect, because we were representing local folks as well and people of color. And so it really came down to, kind of starting from the top and making these goals and making sure they were all represented throughout the entire construction team. So really thinking about these spaces and how comfortable they can be, and doing all this work up front really allowed us to take something that was an old tow yard next to the freeway and turn it into something really beautiful that the community can kind of be a part of and come into this space as well. And I'm going to share a few other projects that are that one was complete, but these others are sort of in different stages of development. This is Albina 1. It's the first project in the Albina Vision Trust Community Investment Plan. It's affordable housing, and it's the first project to anchor a 96-acre area of development that will be a place to welcome back folks in the Black community who've been pushed out after their homes were razed and businesses taken, and they were kind of pushed out to farther out in Portland, but an opportunity for people to come back and to develop this as a really joyful neighborhood for the Black community. And it includes this really beautiful garden for kids to play in, for people to hang out with, even though it's, it's right in the city and it's very urban and it's next to the freeway, but there's sort of this nice little garden and a really special calm space. Williams and Russell is another project that's very close by, and this is not under construction yet. Albina 1 is under construction. We're working on the facade now. But Williams and Russell is a parcel where it was another one of those that, businesses were raised, it was taken so a hospital could expand, and then 70 years later, nothing had ever happened with it. So what we're building here is home ownership opportunities. So you see those as green townhouses. There's also rental affordable apartments, and there's a Black business hub, which is an incubator for Black businesses to kind of get going, to get a leg up, to start really progressing before they move out into the rest of the neighborhood. So we're really excited about this project. It's so beautiful. And then we've got a couple of libraries as well. Again, these are all in Albina, and these are all in the Black neighborhood of Portland. So we're really proud to get to work on these. And this is the North Portland Library. This very small addition is the Black Cultural Center. So it's kind of focused around Afrofuturism and a place for community to come together. It's under construction. They just got C of O. It'll be open in February. It'll have a grand opening. And I'm really excited that people are going to get to come in and see this really beautiful space that's been created. And then the Albina Library is another library working on in the same neighborhood. And this is another, the other one was also an addition to a Carnegie. This is a very large addition to a Carnegie. It's 30,000 square feet. And this one has a big outdoor courtyard and has some really beautiful canted brick on the exterior. And we're really excited for this to be done later in the spring. And now I'm going to hand it off to Michael Gastineau, and he's going to talk to you about Portland State University. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Gastineau. I'm an architect here at Lever, and I'm going to take us now about 4 miles south of our office across the Willamette River to Portland State University's campus in downtown Portland. This is the new Schnitzer School of Art, Art History, and Design. It's a 4-story, 100,000 square foot mass timber structure that brings together the university's various arts programs for the first time all under one roof, which in itself is very exciting, but the project also represents an important investment that PSU is making in their urban campus and the downtown area at large. We are actually occupying a full city block, and we're situated in a really wonderful location at the south end of what's known as the park blocks, this linear green space that connects the city on this north-south axis. And so that site acts both as a gateway to the campus, but also acts as, I think, an anchor to a growing and thriving downtown arts district. So in bringing all these programs together, there's been a real spirit of connectedness that's permeated the design, and I think has led us and led PSU to want to bring this program out to the urban and the cultural context through the arts. Throughout the design process, Lever also worked with a diverse cohort of BIPOC students and educators within the college. And we gathered data that helped inform various aspects of the project, so we understood and explored how we make spaces for learning that are more equitable and more approachable, and ultimately better for creation. Some of those architectural goals that we came up with included things like ample natural light, things you would expect for an art school, a great connection to the outdoors, spaces that feel like they can get messy and be used. And that also led us to organize then the program around a series of galleries and common spaces that occur at different scales, but really promote that sense of cross-pollination amongst these programs. We also employed tall 15 and 18-foot floor-to-floor heights, which allowed us to bring in full height glazing and then bathe these 40-foot deep structural bays with ample amounts of daylight. I think the mass timber structure itself is also one of the keys in achieving that, that value and approachability to the project. So here we see over 350 glulam columns, 380 glulam beams. We also have a CLT floor deck, which isn't pictured in this diagram. But in trying to embody that idea of forest to frame, I think one of the things I'm actually most proud of with this project is that we're able to source the majority of our glulam materials from tribal forests that are owned and operated by the Yakima and the Umpqua tribes, both here in Oregon and in Washington State. And that's a degree of sourcing that wouldn't have been available a number of years ago, but is now, I think, very excitingly, is now becoming more and more of a focus across our projects. At Lever, we're also intensely interested in how our buildings come together, and we try to embrace the mess that comes with that process and have fun with prototyping. Sometimes that means you just got to throw a happy hour. So for PSU, we got together with a bunch of our material mock-ups that we worked on and got the whole office to vote on the best shades of green for the project. Aptly enough, the winning color that you see on the right there was named Doug Fir Green. We are currently under construction and broke ground last fall. So I'm going to take us now to look at Timber Labs facility in North Portland, where our glulam materials are being finished. You'll see our 40-foot long spanning glulam beams, a number of various glulam columns, and various fittings being installed. Timber Labs is able to achieve a 1/8-inch tolerance with these materials, which is really incredible. And one of the ways that we facilitate that is this in-depth pre-construction and coordination process where quite literally every bolt, every connector is independently modeled and accounted for. And in our case, I think we had almost 1,000 CLT floor penetrations that were also organized and coordinated in advance. But I should say for all of the high-tech processes that we engage with, I think at the end of the day, my favorite detail on the project just ended up being the old-fashioned mortise and tenon connections that we employed for our primary glue lams. So we are scheduled for completion in May of 2026, and we're all super excited to be seeing the building come to life. Thank you all. I'm going to now pass to Jonathan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jonathan Hebner. I'm a principal here, and I'm directly involved in most of this firm's research and innovation activities relative to mass timber. I'm an Oregon native and really have a profound appreciation for the potential that the forest possessed. And ultimately, the time that I spent as a kid outdoors led to my interest and involvement in architecture. At the turn of the century in Oregon, we were harvesting old growth forests to build these really massive timber structures that you see here. There is no longer a smart way to be doing this. It's just not appropriate, and we need to preserve the old growth that we have. So we're looking to more sustainable ways of creating structures that can manage our forests in a different way. Our journey in timber research really started in 2015 when Lever was awarded the Tallwood design competition that Thomas mentioned. So this is for a 12-story high-rise that incorporated this rocking wall core, which is really fascinating, and I'll talk about a little bit more later. But the competition organized us to demonstrate that building high-rise structures like this were possible in high seismic areas. And it included $1.5 million of grant funding to do full-scale testing. And if you're interested, there's a model of this in New York and some other mass timber projects at the Skyscraper Museum through the end of this week. So check it out. So I was fortunate as a part of this to be able to do 40 full-scale tests around the country for acoustics, structural, and seismic, or excuse me, fire testing, so that we could demonstrate that this would be something that's codifiable. And the results of these were all made public. And really led to the adoption of the Type 4 building code that we're starting to all use around the country now, as well as the project getting permitted in 2017. So this is an example of some of the testing that we're doing currently over 8 years later. This is for a 12-story point-supported high-rise structure in Portland that is going through permit right now. So with that in mind, I'll share 3 projects that show a few other examples of how we look at our research in the office. And I'll start with the Oregon Conservation Center, which is the state headquarters for the Nature Conservancy. It's about a couple miles from the office. So the Nature Conservancy really wanted to have a building that embodied their values. And so conservation and restoration are key to their mission. And they wanted to also signal their presence in Portland. So at the time of the project, they were occupying this nondescript building that was actually a former parole office, and nobody knew where it was. So instead of tearing that building down, we really wanted to look at it as an opportunity for restoration that was similar for their values. And so we looked at how we source materials very carefully. So this diagram shows a few of the different conservation sites, the smaller bubbles down below, for landscapes that they manage in Oregon. And we wanted to take the materials that were in these landscapes and demonstrate their use within the building. So for example, the material that of the outdoor roof deck, which is an FSC certified cedar board, is harvested from a site in Willapa Bay where they have a restoration project to sustain and protect old growth. We also were able to use FSC certified 7-ply CLT, which not only is a mouthful, but it's also is a really cool thing to do for the structural roof. And it created this great convening space that brought people together to solve major conservation challenges. The load-bearing timber window wall that you see here was another really great innovative piece of this project that supported that big, huge piece of CLT that we saw in a roof deck above. I think the biggest success story, and one of my favorite from this, is the juniper cladding system that we use for the entire project. It almost looks like concrete in this image beyond. Juniper is a tree that's native to Oregon, but because of fire suppression, it's become a major environmental issue. The trees are very hardy, but they also suck up a lot of groundwater, which inhibits the growth of native grasses that threatened sage grouse depend on. So the goal was to develop a market for this juniper through this project that would enable the trees to be removed and restore groundwater back into the ecosystem. So I'll move on from the Nature Conservancy and head to Adidas North American headquarters. This project overlooks the Willamette and is a mile from the office. It was a 450,000 square foot mass timber project that needed to be built in 23 months. Adidas was adamant about the delivery date and had a very specific and set budget. So to build that quickly, we had to think about how to prefabricate all the major building elements, including the structure and the facade. This is one of the larger buildings, the Gold Building, that I'll focus on. The most innovative element that helped us meet this goal was the structural system for the Gold Building. It was a hybrid precast column beam system that uses a cross-laminated timber cassette that you can see that's being installed here. The approach enabled us to eliminate all the steel connection hardware and really speed up the construction process. And ultimately, it's just a hack on the typical precast parking garage where we take that wood cassette and swap it in instead of using the precast concrete plank. Another innovation was the idea of this perforated precast girder that's up here in the ceiling. It allowed us to run the ducting and mechanicals through it and really allowed for a clean, uncluttered space that showed off the wood and allowed people to focus on the work and not the doodad hanging over their head. So the type of innovation that we do really benefits from these mock-ups. So this is an example of how we involve all the trades to actually do the work. We work to minimize the number of details and connections and then practice the installation of those to make sure that it's run smooth and sequencing correctly. So it also demonstrates the value of our approach to the client, in this case, Adidas, and was the key to the overall reduction in the schedule and budget, which in this case, I think was 3 months off the overall schedule with the structure being built in 6 weeks. So I love the facade at Sunset here. And I guess I wanted to say that we've talked a lot about the Northwest and Oregon, but I really wanted to emphasize that the work that we're doing for testing and research at Lever is all over the US, and it's including working with a lot of international and national partners for global benefit. So I think with that in mind, the final project I'll share is one of my favorites in San Diego, which is home of the National Science Foundation's largest shake table test. We joined a multidisciplinary team in 2016, funded by the National Science Foundation, to design a self-centering rocking wall system that's 10 stories, mass timber, and modeled on the framework project. So this tower, what this means is that the tower is vertically tensioned so that in an earthquake, the entire structure can move, but then recenter and with absolutely no damage. So you can kind of see the movement of that in the video. It's the largest shake table test and the largest structure to be tested at full scale. And the project subjected this poor tower to over hundreds of earthquake simulations, including the Northridge earthquake of '94, with 0 damage. So I think with that, this project demonstrated the viability, and we will, I would be passing to Haley, but I think Thomas will come back to share.
Thank you. I'm very hopeful that Haley's doing well. So I'm going to talk about, 2 recent projects we've completed in LA, Spring Street and NBC Universal. So Spring Street is just down the street from our office in Los Angeles in Chinatown. And, we can actually see it from the rooftop. It's set on a really busy urban corner right next to the metro that you stop for Chinatown that you see there on the left. But what it is really for us, a new type of office building and mixed use project that really leverages the climate and landscape that Los Angeles is known for, which is this incredibly temperate climate. And interestingly enough, technically, it's really a renovation because the project actually takes a windowless 1980s era retail warehouse, sort of big box retail, and we basically scraped that, but then we recycled the parking garage and grafted this new structure on top of it. And it's one of the first and largest hybrid CLT buildings in LA. And so, like Adidas, it is a hybrid, but it's really focused on CLT and steel, which means that it's actually a lighter structure. And we thought this was a great way to introduce timber to LA. So it's not all in timber, but it's really sort of leveraging these things. And one of the things that was most exciting for us about it was this CLT and steel cantilever. We were able to do this sort of really slim space that can be shared outdoor balconies that really wrap the building and contributing to the sort of distinctive look that you can sort of see from the subway as you're coming by. I would say the best view of this building is actually from that location. And I think one of the things we were really keen on is integrating this idea of outdoor workspace into every experience of the building. So you can actually walk up the building without going outside. And we started this pre-COVID, but now it's sort of become something that I think has been really embraced. And you can sort of see that in the images here of those spaces, this incredible garden that comes up through the building. And we worked really closely with James Corner Field Operations to sort of develop this really interesting kind of canyon-like landscape. We also have a lot of sustainability kind of elements. There's a 220,000 kilowatt solar array that will be up, and then we actually reclaim all the water from the building to irrigate this landscape you see here. The next project I'm going to talk about has been like a real labor of love over 8 years, and Haley worked on this for a number of years. It was a competition that we won in 2017, and it's really about rethinking NBC Universal's campus. So after really a century of growth in this incredibly important lot, they were really looking to kind of create a new heart. And in this image, you can see the employee commons on the left and this sort of new office building on the right. And for us, the new campus really reflects NBC's universal commitment to being in person, to being creative, to being innovative, to working together. And the landscape is really designed to bring folks together, offering spaces to build, collaborate, and relax. And then it's connected to a new green spine that you saw there in the previous image that runs the whole length of the campus. But one of the key buildings is really the Commons, which is modeled after a zoetrope, which is the origins of motion pictures. And within that, there's state-of-the-art theaters, a conference center, a commissary, outdoor spaces to work. We really wanted to blur the boundary between indoors and outdoors to really take advantage of the temperate landscape. And we worked really closely over an 8-year period with James Corner and the team there. It was just an amazing collaboration based out of New York and Philadelphia, and really create a landscape that really draws inspiration from Southern California campuses, but also the natural character of the plants that you can do there. So these idea of outdoor amenities, we worked in getting very mature trees was really important to the design. And I think the grand opening, they have actually, I think, an event and party here every week. It's completely transformed how people think about coming to work and at NBC Universal. And we're really proud of that that opportunity. And I think one of the other things is really the office building itself. It's actually lodged into the slope to allow for southern light to actually come into the building. But we also created this thing called the flex floor on the 7th floor that really connects all those pieces together. And there's a major lobby that really brings landscape into the space. But I wanted to also point out that we were really interested in doing this building in timber, but that wasn't really possible at that moment. So we really focused on the timber curtain wall that you see here, which is one of the first in a Type 1 building in Los Angeles. So it's like in every project, I think there's an opportunity for innovation. So I'm going to come back to myself and complete our presentation in a project that I think really, is in the other Portland. So we're in Portland, Oregon. We're moving now to Portland, Maine. And the Portland Museum of Art was an international open competition that we won in 2022. And, it was an addition to an existing Harry Cobb building, a partner at IMP, built in 1982, but it was also this whole idea of unifying the campus. This is a campus that I think started in 1800s with the House Museum and then evolved into a pavilion, and then the addition for Harry Cobb kind of came on. And so I think the project brings together, so many of the ideas we've actually been talking about today, really this idea of innovation, this idea of inspiration in the arts, and then a real sort of sense of stewardship of the community and the landscape. And I think for me, as somebody who's worked on a number of museums, it was really coming back to a program typology that was really part of sort of my formative years as an architect. And there was a two-stage competition. And I just wanted to show you the sort of pages we submitted for the first stage. And the big idea was this idea of flip the narrative, and it's sort of a metaphor of flipping the building, but also flipping your perception of what a museum can be. So thinking of a museum, instead of thinking of it as an archive, thinking of it as a community. Instead of thinking of something for select few, thinking of it for all. This idea of art for all was something that the museum really believed in and their programs reflected. But I think one of the key things that happened during that competition phase is we were really fortunate to engage with a Native American individual named Chris Newell, who's also a Wabanaki tribal member. So the Wabanaki people have been in Maine for over 10,000 years. And really their purpose as a people is to greet the rising sun as it touches the northern continent each morning. And I think that was really moving for us. And we were thinking, how can we create a building that kind of embraces that idea? And the shape of the roof really came out of that. And it really was meaningful to Chris, and that the idea that this roof aligns with the rising of the summer solstice each year. And so these are just some images of the competition, but it also, I think the same idea, it's this campus unification and expansion that links these three existing buildings and the older original gallery pavilion you see on the foreground. And I think the museum has put a huge amount of work engaging the communities in Portland and the state of Maine, but really thinking about how we could create spaces that really leverage that narrative and build an open framework that is about creating spaces that open up and belong to the community. So we wanted the building to really open up to Congress Square. So something that's really solid becomes something that's more open, and that interior experience is also expressed. The interior experience also expresses that programmatic idea of art for all, with the new Free Street that goes through the building, but also runs vertically up into the light. And this is an image, just super quick, of that the actual jury took of us after we finished. And it was, obviously we were really happy with how things turned out, and we were awarded the project. I'm going to run through a couple just orientations of where the project sits now in terms of rendering. This is the view on Free Street, where the building opens up to Congress Square with these programmatic elements that can be open. So you have the multi-purpose space up top, the galleries in the ground floor, and then really that the life of the arts can be something that happens throughout the year and seasons. This is a new entry living room space that really welcomed people. But I mean, one of the key things was really this idea that we wanted to regionally source the materials. So we've been working really intensively with the University of Maine and others to make this happen. And then we took the former main entry lobby and then basically turned it into a new second floor. And then I'm just going to run quickly through these. This is the second floor, 8,000 multi-purpose gallery space, which is exactly the type of space they didn't have in the original building. And that's connected directly to a double height cafe space that then backs up and has views of the landscape, and then backs up onto a multi-purpose event space and theater that connects directly to Congress Square. And the life of both these spaces become part of the urban fabric for all seasons. But I want to end just thinking of architecture as a catalyst, thinking about that this building can really have a regenerative impact that expands beyond its specific site, and really be part of the, thinking about Portland, but also thinking about Maine and the Northeast, and the idea of stewardship of both buildings, but also the health of the larger landscape in Maine, and also the culture. And I think, and the fact that, it is the most forested state in the United States. And I think finally providing a place where the incredible collection that is very much inspired by this landscape, the Winslow Homer it was so important for him to think about that landscape and making that accessible to all. So I want to thank you for virtually visiting us today, and we're going to open it up for questions. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Lever, for this inspiring, multifaceted presentation. I think we really got a sense of your work, of course, but also of your firm. And we saw how prolific you've been in the past several years with all the different projects. There's really so much I think we could talk about here, from your office culture to materials and mass timber, of course, to construction labor and equity, to the experience of space. And, you know, I think as the audience has been told in the chat, please start entering your own questions. But I think we're going to just take a couple minutes, and I'm going to ask a couple questions, and then we'll turn it over to the audience questions from the chat. So my first question is actually kind of a practical question. And in some ways, it's probably something that you are so advanced by now that you don't think about so much, but I think it could be relevant for some of our audience, including me. And that is, you know, I talk to many firms, and I've had this experience myself, who have tried to use mass timber in projects, who've thought about mass timber, have designed the first version in mass timber, only to have the mass timber get value engineered out, you know, near the end in the final decision-making process. So I wonder, you know, how have you been able to keep the mass timber in the project? You did mention one project where that wasn't possible, but you found another innovation, the timber curtain wall. But, you know, how have you been able to keep in the mass timber? And by extension, do you have any advice for other firms that are looking to do that as well?
Yeah, I think the key is, and it goes back to the sort of culinary analogy, that you sort of start with the ingredient and try to think about how little you can do to it. So I think one of the things I think that we've been successful at is like our mass timber structures are sort of versions of things that we've been working on since 2016. So like we're continually trying to make them simpler and simpler. And I think that one of the challenges is we don't yet have the infrastructure in the United States to do things, you know, in ways that maybe are sort of relatively straightforward in Europe. But that's really changing. I mean, we're actually building right now with TimberLab 185,000 square foot state-of-the-art CLT factory in Oregon. We didn't show that today, but they're going to have all the sort of efficiencies and ability to fabricate that a European kind of manufacturing facility. And they're also vertically integrating. They bought a glulam manufacturer. So those kinds of like opportunities where they can sort of see the leverage the kind of integration of these elements as opposed to the architect kind of doing it, I think will definitely change the kind of opportunity for people. But I think just high level, just keep it really simple when you're starting. It's like, you know, if you're gonna, you don't want to just run a marathon the first time you get out of the gate, right? You got to sort of build it up. And I think that's sort of kind of been our mantra.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm also thinking, maybe there's too many metaphors, but it's kind of like, well, you're helping to build the ecosystem. And what I was thinking about in terms of metaphor, it's kind of like waiting tables. Like the first question you get asked if you go in for an interview for waiting tables is, have you waited tables before? But it's like, that's an impossible scenario, because how are you ever going to wait tables if you have to have waited tables before? It's kind of, could be the same thing about designing a building in mass timber, or on the other hand, being a contractor, you know, making a building in mass timber. So you kind of got to find the way to get in there, convince the people that you have kind of waited tables before or whatever. But I think there's also a kind of ecosystem effect, because you all have really helped develop the ecosystem. Now that we have more manufacturing capability, now that we can point to buildings that survived the 10-story shake table, now that we can see a lot of beautiful mass timber buildings that aren't falling down or catching on fire, then it kind of builds. So there's this kind of cooperative effect. And so thank you to you as your firm for helping to push the ecosystem along. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about scale. And so I've been thinking a lot about scale, and I think we've maybe talked a little bit about this as well. But my thinking here is that with architecture accounting for 40% of global carbon emissions, I mean, we all know that now. And with the target of eliminating all these emissions by 2050, we have like a massive scaling up problem. And when I see work like your work, it's tempting to want to take your approach with mass timber and with thinking holistically about the project and thinking about the sourcing of the timber and also the labor and all of this stuff. It seems like, okay, that's an approach that seems like it's working. It's both got the, working on the carbon problem, and it's also including equity. And it's tempting to want to take that approach and rapidly scale it up everywhere. Like that's what we need in the whole world to make it global in a way, because we have this global urgent carbon problem and equity problem. But there's also part of your work that reminds us that the best work is local. And so I guess what I'm just wondering about is like, do you have a framework for thinking about the relationship between the global and the local? I mean, you've talked about it a little bit in your projects, but how can we tackle this global massive problem if all good action is just local? How can it add up? If you see where I'm going with that.
Yeah, do you want to tackle the local, and I can talk about the global a little bit?
I mean, when I present our Meyer Memorial Trust project, there's so many things that we did in that project because the client was on board, the whole team was on board, and we were all working together to do as much as we could in terms of sustainable wood sourcing, but also in terms of equity and all these ways that people hadn't been thinking of before. But I think the real lesson there is that you don't have to do all of these things to have a successful project that makes an impact. Just take one of those ideas or two of those ideas and use them on your next project. Like engage a subcontractor or a consultant you haven't worked with before and give them part of the scope, have them partner with a bigger firm to do that work, find a new source for materials and use them on one project. And it is about local because it means that all of us who are doing this work have the opportunity to make an impact. We're 35 people in a firm. We're not going to change the whole world, but we can make an impact on the projects that we're doing in different places around the world, right? And it's really such a privilege to be able to do this work and then to inspire other people to do something really cool on their own project. And I'm not going to know what that is because you are all in different locations with different community dynamics and different people there that need something else that the albino community doesn't need, right? So I think that's how we scale, is by all saying we're all taking responsibility, but we're not overwhelmed by the size of this job that we have to do, but we're doing what we each can with our skills, right? With what we can each do in our place.
Yeah, I think just to add to that is like, we're not wedded to doing projects out of timber.
Right.
And I think that when we're working on a project overseas, we're like, well, what is the sort of most regional material relative to the culture of building in that place? And then how can you amplify it? So if I'm not from Portland, I've been here now longer than any other place, but I worked in Switzerland, I went to school in Boston, and I worked in San Francisco. But what was exciting, it was the sort of accessibility into the culture. And I keep coming back to the culinary model. If I was like in if I moved to New Mexico, I probably wouldn't be doing timber projects. I'd be working on Adobe, you know, and trying to innovate within that sort of idiom. So I think you think of it from a culinary point of view, there are specific sort of agricultural products or cultures that are maybe specific to a region. And I think what I think architects can do is they can amplify those, and then they come up with something that is in a way, by understanding convention, you can innovate because you know the difference between what's conventional and what's sort of taking that convention and turning it on its side. And I think, and that sometimes is the difference between, you know, something that is, you know, sort of basic and something that kind of catches people. And I think you have to do both. I think we have to both inspire with the architecture at the same time as you're leveraging these sort of larger issues about climate change, these larger issues about equity. I don't think it's not enough for the building just to be like, oh, we engage with people and we talk to a bunch of people. It has to be also a great experience that stands alone without that. And then when people understand and get into it, they sort of see this sort of deeper connection.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It seems fitting with your body of work. I mean, one thing I'm taking away from your answers are that, you know, yes, you all have pushed, you know, you've moved the needle in terms of mass timber, and you've given us a lot of models and insights and hybrid approaches and things like that that can help others. But maybe more fundamentally, what could be kind of expanded from you all as a firm is this broader approach, you know, and that approach could work with different materials, it could work with different communities, it could work with different building types, and obviously in different parts of the world. So the mistake would be to say, okay, that's a great building, let's replicate that exact building with that exact material everywhere. It would be like, let's take that approach to all the different places. And I think you've set up a way of saying, hey, and let's all exchange ideas. So, you know, so another firm in another part of the world has their approach, and like, let's make our findings more collaborative and less competitive. You know, even though the framework of architecture, we have to sometimes compete, but let's share the results, you know, and the experiments and the findings of the approach.
Yeah, and the work that, you know, Jonathan does in terms of innovation and research with National Science Foundation and all these other organizations, that's really part of that, right? We're using that work to contribute to the body of knowledge in our industry. And other people can obviously take that, NSF funded or national or USDA Forest Service funded. That's essentially open source information and detailing and testing that is for the industry.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm so impressed, you know, because not only do you have these great buildings, this great framework, but then you're doing all this research. So I did have a question about that as well, you know. I mean, and I like that, you know, you're tapping into this culture of research, which is like, especially in science and engineering research, that you should share your findings, that you should even share your failures, that you're not like, sometimes in architecture, we get so caught up in competing with each other for jobs and self-promoting and stuff that we hide the bad stuff, and that we don't share anything that's working because we want to use it just for ourselves. And but by doing an NSF grant, you kind of automatically, like you just said, Chandra, have to be part of a community of sharing the research and the results, you know, more broadly, so everyone can use them. And so it's amazing that you're doing that among so many other things you're doing. You know, a level deeper is that I think, you know, not only the more research stuff with NSF and the big, you know, shake table timber test and things like that, and the 40 tests you've done, Jonathan, and the firm. But I know that you've talked about in this lecture and in the past that you get very involved with the manufacturers, and you showed us, you know, images of that, and that you get involved early on, and that you are curious about how they're doing things, and you ask questions, and you look for opportunities for design within the manufacturing process, not just design of the massing of the building, and not just saving, design for like aesthetics, but it's also process. You're designing process and materials themselves and assemblies. So my question there is kind of like, how do you find time for that? And again, do you have advice? Because I think I'm going to turn to some audience questions in a second, but I think some of the audience questions are kind of saying like, how can we do more of what you're doing? So just like Mass Timber, but how do you have time for NSF research? How do you have time to go to look at the manufacturers and talk to them about what's going on? And do you have any advice for others?
I mean, I think I just want to go back really quickly. Maybe Jonathan can chime in, but and come up. But you know, this lever started with myself and nobody, or two people. And when we were working then, we were working on incredibly tight budgets. So I think what we did is like, and they were speculative projects. So instead of like starting with this grand idea about the design, we also started with like, what's the cheapest material we can use that we're not gonna, you know, it's not gonna make us throw up, basically, you know. It's like, and really thinking about like how you can assemble those materials as you're thinking about the design, and that the design concept also connects to that material. So like one of our first projects, which was the art house project, we were really in that mode of really thinking about an ingredients like, you know, a based approach where you're assembling these elements so that you know from the beginning that there isn't something in a way more efficient in the design. It's sort of baked into the idea. And I think that ethic has really sort of evolved as we've had more opportunity to say work directly with the manufacturer. Like that sheet metal manufacturers, their Skyline sheet metal, we've been working with them since 2013. So I can call them up and say, hey, we want to develop this new profile. Can you help us work it out? So I just think that's something that developing those relationships as best you can, where, you know, they know that if we develop the profile with them, they'll get a first shot at it.
Right. I think the first profiles that we did may have taken 3 months to figure out. And then most recently on a project, we sent a drawing, and all of a sudden, a day later, it was literally 1 day later, the profile showed up. So I think it's in that capital of the relationships. It's really critical to think about your people that you're working with. And I know that, you know, especially on the East Coast, sometimes there is that kind of tension between builders and designers. And we really wanted to make that relationship the project. And that's been really successful. And it's also very incremental, like every project, just picking one small thing. And then the second thing that I would say is that the grants that we've gotten through the USDA, that's set up so that the research work, you can fold that into the project, and that grant helps you make that time and make you feel like you're not just doing it on your own steam. So
Yeah, all of that makes a lot of sense, and it's super inspiring. You know, I'm going to turn to the audience, a couple audience questions in a second, but just quickly to say I really like how you're thinking of, you know, in the presentation you talked about thinking about an expanded site. You know, so you're thinking not just about the plot of land where the building is, but the plot of land where the forest is, and the location of the factory where things are made, and all of the different communities and stakeholders that are being brought in. So you have this kind of idea of an expanded site, an expanded supply chain, and stakeholders. And then also now you're just talking about a kind of expanded team that, like, as opposed to this setup where every project needs to get like 3 bids for construction, or you need to like ask, you know, engineers, and, you know, start with a different engineer each project to bring them onto the team, that you like build your team and you have your fabricators who you've worked with for years and years, or who you have a dialogue with, and you can kind of building that expanded team seems really relevant as well. Like both of those things, thinking of the expanded site and the expanded team, I think can make better projects, as you're showing us. So there are a few different questions that are coming in, and in some kind of interpretation that I'm having here, they're like from different kind of people at different levels, all asking for your advice. So I'm going to start with the first question came in, but it's also the kind of the first level. And this question is from Hisam, and it's first, thanks you so much for your lecture. And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit the questions, but can you please share advice on interviews at Lever for early career designers? So more or less like, if they want to work at Lever, what should they say to you in the interview? But also, what kind of growth and mindset is expected from a young designer who doesn't have any experience in timber construction? What kind of growth and mindset is expected to be successful at Lever?
I mean, I would say like an intense curiosity in terms of how things are made, you know, but also a wider view of design as a whole. So I think that you know, that curiosity of like asking lots of questions, of like being proactive, of really engaging with the material. I think sometimes I'm old enough that I actually started in architecture practice drawing by hand. And I remember, you know, Joe Eschereg, who I was working with, he's like, you really need to think about like, it's not just a line you're drawing, it's actually the building, you know? And so I think that understanding of like, really sort of immersing yourself in the fact that what you're doing is actually something that isn't the line, it's actually a thing. And I think that is sometimes challenging today because we can make almost any form in the computer. You know, we can do all these things, but then they're not necessarily connected to the culture of building or a material. So that if you draw a line in a material or something that's timber, that's very different than a line in a material that's steel. So really, I think living that the real experience of the material as you're thinking about design is something that is really important to me personally in sort of younger designers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now coming to a kind of different level, but in a way a similar question. Evrim asks, what would you recommend to architects who want to make the switch to sustainable architecture practices mid-career, about where to start in terms of self-training and networking, or with any other ways and methods?
I think I wouldn't view sustainability as something that's separate from the practice. And so I think it really just is, it doesn't even require a switch other than just making a conscious effort to think about where something comes from, how it gets to the project, and what's the purpose that you're using it for. One of the manufacturers that we worked with, or it's actually a forest in Oregon, had an oak forest, and he was having a really hard time with the fact that people would take the prime cut of the tree for these beautiful floors, and he was left with the rest of the tree. And when we had that conversation with him, we realized that he was thinking about this as an opportunity for design, where we could actually start designing around the different pieces of the tree that hadn't been used and come up with products and ideas for the use of that. And that ended up turning into the floor for the Portland airport for another project. So I think it's just shifting your mindset to think about how you use materials and where you use them, not that you're making a career change.
I want to do a pitch for this company called Zena.
Oh, Zena Forests, yeah.
Z-E-N-A, right?
Yeah.
And they do this incredible new European like matchstick flooring system where they're basically using all the parts of the trees to make these amazing oak floors. They're really beautiful, and I think it's a great example of innovation at just this one sort of simple level. And I just think like, to build on what Jonathan said, it's like, you know, often early on in our career we didn't have the budget to do even lead. It's just, you're just looking for like opportunities. So I really don't think about sustainability as being, in a way, this thing you have to switch to. I think it's a thing that you just sort of try to apply in little instances. You kind of have to like, you know, walk, you crawl, and then you walk, and then you run, right? And you just can't do it all at once. So just taking those little instances, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I like that. I appreciate that a lot. zooming into maybe a little bit of a more practical technical question. This is from Oliver. Fantastic presentation and insight into the practice, really beautiful work. I wondered if the team had experience of the insurance market and if there is an increasing acceptance and understanding of the use of mass timber in the projects they've worked on.
You want me to take this one? So I think this is a hot topic in the last year. I think we've been talking with different brokers that have been, we're trying to bring them into our community, let's put it that way, because I think they've been separate. There's a lot of discussion going on around builders risk insurance and around how timber's performing. And I think our role as designers is to, and if you can convince building owners to do this, is to share the information about the life of your projects and the data that comes out of them with the different brokerage companies so that they can start to build their data set. And I think that's happening right now. And there's a lot of people that are involved in developing this, and it is shifting and changing. But just like the development of all these projects that we've been talking about in materials, it's slowly building. And people just need to share the information about their projects so that we can tout all those victories that are, or the high performance buildings that are occurring. And I think the other thing is to just talk really early in the design phases about what are the owner's objectives for the insurance and what questions do they need to answer for the brokers to be successful, and not get way into CDs and realize that you've got a critical issue that needs to be addressed, or a question that can't be answered that you didn't think about in design. So bringing those thoughts in and questions in and asking the owners about it as early as possible to help them out with this.
Yeah, I hope that makes a lot of sense to me. I hope that's a good answer for our question asker. I think we're pretty much out of time, but I do think that's a really helpful way to end, with re-emphasizing this point that you've helped us understand a few times about the importance of sharing information. And there's one question we can't quite get to, I think, but it's about creating a kind of community of sharing knowledge, sharing approaches, and you've shown us some really inspiring ways to do that in a big vision, but also in like really nuts and bolts ways, including with insurance and technical details and performance of materials. So I know Anne is back to give us some final words, but from my point of view, thank you very much, Lever, for what you've shown us today and how inspiring you are.
And I'd like to add my thanks for everyone for this thoughtful and really broad-ranging presentation that truly explored innovative modes of building sustainably and so effectively shared both aspects of community engagement and inclusivity, and in effect, some of the really delightful experiential aspects of inhabiting buildings that implement timber construction and respond sensitively to ecological and topographical qualities of each building site. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. There'll be a video of this event if you want to refer back to it, soon on the League's website. For League members in New York or planning a visit, the next in-person after hours will be at the Thailand engineering firm on Thursday, February 20th. And if you visit the League's website, you can find a whole lot of resources on sustainability, from a number of past programs to our ongoing From Field to Form series. We're going to be looking at cork this spring. We've looked at hemp and a variety of materials. I'm thinking maybe we need something called offcuts with timber scraps in the fall. But there's just lots to be found on our website and lots to be gained through a number of our programs. So thank you, everyone, for taking part in this one.